The story kicks off with a mellow opening sequence between two lovers. Seaman is a mage who shows the legendary Tillman's castle to his beloved Katarina, claiming that the castle has stood strong despite its enemies over the past 2 centuries. Katarina pays little attention to his fun fact of the day because she's worried they'll get caught in a restricted area. However, the mage is confident that no one will be able to spot them at this point. She tries to get away by using her chores as an excuse, but Seaman insists on her staying for even just a bit. He really wanted to show her the beautiful view from this spot, which is also complemented by the beautiful day. She takes a moment to comprehend what's so special about the land he takes pride in. After all, it's a place above the realm of commoners. Interestingly, Seaman shares that he may just be able to pull off buying a rich house in this premium location. He reasons that he'll get promoted into an intermediate mage soon because of a thesis he wrote on a new kind of golem. His seniors loved his thoughts, so it may not just be a pipe dream after all. They even shared that if the elder mages acknowledge the thesis fully, he'll get a promotion. Though it may not be a big house, Seaman is confident it could hold the two of them with ease. This confession of his makes her feel flustered. Seaman shares his heart and proposes to Katarina. After all, she's had her fair share of difficulty and hardships making up for him. Seaman wants to be the one to take care of her now, and it is his dream to make her the happiest person he knows. With a smile, Katarina teases the mage by reminding him that he still has to get promoted in order for that dream to come true. Seaman calls her mean, and I understand. The girl really wants that house apparently. Katarina adds that it was just a joke, and that she wasn't expecting for a hopeful day like this to arrive for the two of them. At the time, Seaman believed that they could live a life of bliss, of happiness. The day finally came where his thesis was being acknowledged. It was termed genius for his discovery of a new magic technique involving golem, and its impact was destined to change the entire world. Seaman worked night and day to make his dream a reality. He told the Duke that he could only make it this far because of his consistent investment and support. The Duke promised to support him further at this pace. But something frustrated Seaman as he clenched his hand. He was starting to realize a cruel truth of the world he was living in. There was nothing about this world that rewarded his hard work. He didn't get that promotion despite his brilliant contribution. The Duke suddenly asks the Elder about a request that he made. The arrogant Elder Mage decides to bring the woman he requested for, despite her low status. When the woman is presented by the guards, Seaman's eyes grow to horror and anguish. It's Katarina, his very own lover, and she's being subject to the Duke's demands as the guards carry her away. The mage's inner frustrations are calling out to him. He no longer wants to be trampled by the cruelty of the nobles. The Duke is satisfied with the woman's looks. After all, she maintains a reputation for being beautiful. Even the Elder believes that if only her status was different, she could have enjoyed a life of wealth. Everything that Seaman dreamed of in his entire life was starting to now fall apart. Concentrating his magic, he remembers just how much he struggled to protect his dreams. All of that, to get tossed aside by the indifference of the nobles. Seaman unleashes his magic spell in his anger and rebellion. He's past his limit and demands that they release the woman he loves. However, the Elder Mage wasn't planning to sit around to hear him out. Deeming him nothing more than a bottom-feeding trash, this bastard struck him down with a powerful electrical spell. Seaman suffered immense pain, and his suffering caused Katarina's anguish to worsen. The helpless mage falls to his doom. The last thing he sees is the sight of the ones he was betrayed by. Some time passes, and we see him locked up in a cell full of rats, wearing dead eyes and a look of despair and distrust. He had no way but to survive, so he snatched one of the rats just for the cause, marking his days down. This is a true RIP moment for the rats, though. Anyway, Seaman was also looked down upon by the guards keeping him captive. They talked him down for trying to eat a little rat for survival, thinking nothing of a mage of the magic tower in his pathetic condition. The arrogant guard recommends the mage to just spew all of the information regarding his discovered technique. If he does that, chances are they will release him, but he no longer cares or pays attention to the guard's words. He seems alive, but nothing about him shows that he is, not after Katarina's horrifying death. Deprived of meaning, he releases the rat. The guards walk away, remembering how Katarina decided to kill herself for the sake of protecting her loyalty. They look down on her for being a wasteful woman, but honestly, she's the most loyal woman in manhwa I've read so far. They talk down on her when suddenly, Seaman snaps, biting his damn nails in frustration. He apologizes to his fallen lover. Interestingly, the guards are surprised to see the behavior of the rats. It's as if they have stopped dead in their tracks to wait for something or someone. The guards mark this as a strange occurrence. In order to see what's wrong, they decide to kill one of the mice with a spear. I'm telling you guys, manhwa authors just hate rats. Anyway, with that little guy dead on the floor, we see an incantation magic circle on its belly. The spell releases sparks of electricity, hinting that this isn't a typical rat. The guards get uneasy because of this discovery. Revisiting the miserable mage, he reflects how he was too weak to act sooner. Seaman prepares a spell, and the guards know he is up to something, so they try to stop him. But at this rate, he's past the point of no return. He's already built the incantation circle, and he's just begun his onslaught. Placing his hand on the circle, Seaman takes control over the rats using his magic. In his regretful reflection, he is infuriated at his own weakness. After all, then he wouldn't have lost his lover. The circle grows in its potency until it causes the entire cell to explode in a beam of red light. From within the cell emerges a gigantic golem under the control of the broken mage. With the monster by his side, the merciless Seaman claims that he's satisfied with the horrified look on their faces. It reminds him of his fallen lover's terrified face before her death too. Seaman no longer wants to explore the land of reasoning. With one swipe of its claws, the rat golem annihilates their bodies in a brutal attack. He creates a bunch of more rat golems and unleashes his fury. This time, Seaman wants to exact his revenge on the world that betrayed him. The same world that made it impossible for him and Katarina to have lived in happiness. He reassures his befallen lover while walking past the dead bodies of his enemies. He reminds her that he will no longer choose to be weak from this point forward. Now he's set on one goal: to acquire any form of power that he can possibly obtain. With his tear-filled yet determined eyes, Seaman offers a bone-chilling declaration that he will be the one to make things right. We then see the Elder Mage's despaired and shocking expression, seeing Seaman blast his way out on top of a giant golem. The Elder Mage is shocked that he's capable of exercising black magic for his goals, even though he's supposed to be on the side of God. However, Seaman no longer cares and simply doesn't give a damn. The pathetic rat known as the Duke tries to run away for his life, prepared to make any request or do anything that could put him out of danger. There is something Seaman wants, as he extends his hand to unleash a spell. The heartless mage incinerates the Duke's body into ashes, reminding the Duke that his wish is impossible to come true as Katarina can't be revived. This messed up world has destroyed his dreams and taken away everything from him. So this time, Seaman is hell-bent on destruction and revenge. The scene cuts to a man who is being knighted by the king. The hero Lakan is declared to save the world before it falls to complete destruction. They refer to the Black Mage as the Demon King who has created an army of darkness and marked destruction all over God's territory. He is responsible for slaying many lives, and has become responsible for obliterating 2 whole kingdoms, as well as a dukedom. At this rate, the future of humanity rests in the hands of the hero Lakan, who is being entrusted with the duty of bringing this demonic figure down, to kill the Demon King and save their ravaged world. The scene transitions to Lakan observing his blade, and finally raising it in front of the brave warriors of the divine Artenia Empire. He announces how they've lost the brilliant light that once radiated their empire, all due to a shadow that has been looming over the Lodasia continent. Regardless, Lakan is prepared to do anything it takes. He does not intend to stop for the sake of the innocents as well as the fate of the world. The hero loudly declares that today will be the day they mark the death of the Demon King and become the victorious warriors who saved their world. Let's go back to Seaman's backstory for a moment. Katarina once told him about the cruelty of the world and how the kingdom is so cruel to cut off a child's hands for stealing bread. He tried to talk her down because bad things could happen if someone hurt her. Katarina still argued that the nobles were unjust in their punishments, all because they didn't have anything to worry about. Instead, a child has to suffer for lifelong punishment because of the class he was born into. Devastated, the poor girl shared that they didn't choose to be born in the commoner class, so it shouldn't be their fault to suffer so much. Seaman, in an effort to comfort her, gave her the hope that one day, the social differences won't matter between the nobles and the commoners. He hoped for the day they would all live a free life. Katarina addressed that simply saying those words doesn't mean anything, especially if they just keep waiting around for hope. She wanted them to be the one to change the way they saw the world, because otherwise, the future generations to come will also endure the same hardships and sufferings. Seaman dropped his books because of how flustered he got, because she basically talked about how they'll have children while not being married. Katarina told him that's focusing on the wrong details, and reminded the mage of his intentions to marry her in the first place. Seaman's heart is struck with love, and he claims that he's unready to marry her yet. Katarina asks for a yes or no answer, and she thinks he's an idiot for being so shy and easily teased. She thought she was the only person in the world who could marry this guy. The mellow memories end, and we now see the current state of Seaman in front of his demonic palace. He appears completely changed, reminding Katarina that everything will be finished very soon. Lakan and his army of brave warriors stand before him, while he's convincing himself to finally realize the world that Katarina yearned for all this time. The brave warriors of the kingdom step forward, as the hero Lakan refers to the Demon King by his name. He addresses the terrorized state of the world because of his outlash. However, Lakan plans to correct that today by exacting justice in the name of the greater good. Pointing his sword at the boogeyman of the world, he prepares to judge Seaman's evil deeds. In response, Mage couldn't help but release a haughty laughter. He thinks the words God and justice are just pretty and convenient to use. In his anger, Seaman roars that he doesn't fear a god that doesn't exist, and he couldn't care less about a naive hero's sense of justice. Lakan shouts back, declaring that the countless heroes of the Empire are all here today to bring him down. They will be the ones to carry out judgment and destroy him for good. This will be the day the Demon King falls and the world is saved. Lakan and his men rush forward to finish off the Demon King. Countless blades are pointed at the mage, until he reminds them all that they're in no position to judge him. In fact, Seaman claims that he will be the one to judge them and the state of the world. Everything just about his world was lost the moment he lost Katarina, so nothing matters to him anymore. Seaman releases a powerful spell, declaring that he no longer wallows in delusions of righteousness. He only believes in one thing, and he'll show them that with glee. Behind Seaman is the manifestation of his demonic outlash. It pairs with his declaration and desire for power as his only standard of justice. The golems burst free in their manifested forms, while Seaman confidently invites the hero to take a look at the true manifestation of justice. As the giant creature towers before the army of warriors, Seaman intends to sever their naive faith. He wants to mark this day as the beginning of a new era for the world. We then catch a beautiful spread of Seaman's unstoppable golem army ready to serve the Demon King. The first golem unleashes its gigantic fist at the guards. Their faces are the representation of terror and fear, and there is no end in sight to the golems. Seaman refers to these men as nothing more than a bunch of trash. The only thing they have in their lives is the social status they cling to. It's insulting to him that they plan to oppose him like that. With his golems unleashing their rampage, the army is getting swallowed whole. Seaman claims that he will be the one to eradicate every single one of them. Finally, we see the shot of the resolute hero, who lunges forward to bring down the Demon King without mercy in his heart. One powerful swing of the hero's sword severs one of the golem's body like butter. Seaman is actually stunned to see this guy take down an elite-level golem with just a single attack. This makes him finally realize that it would have been impossible for him to defeat the Livia Kingdom despite his army of golems, for they possessed an unstoppable power of their own. Both forces of good and evil address each other and declare that they will kill each other. War begins as the golems fight against the warriors in a brutal battlefield. By the end of it all, there's only blood and countless bodies resting on the ground. Seaman has one elite golem guarding him, and it seems Lakan is exhausted from the endless fight. However, he is still determined to bring the Demon King down for good. Finally, Lakan defeats the final elite-level golem with his precise sword strikes, leaving Seaman undefended. Seaman addresses the hero right before he's about to take his final swing. He wants to remind the hero that the world is rotten to the core, and if it wasn't for the hero stopping him just now, Seaman could have changed everything. His tear-filled errors seem to have made Lakan hesitant in his strike. The Demon King curses Lakan's entire bloodline, promising that he will ensure his family's suffering for generations to come. And with that, Lakan takes his final swing, severing the Demon King's head from his body. This is the end for the Black Mage Seaman. In his final memories, he remembers his lover's words, who reminded him that she felt the happiest with him by her side. It was the day they went to see Tillman's castle that she leaped forward to kiss him, confessing the most powerful 3 words in the world. With those memories, Seaman suddenly regains consciousness. But strangely enough, he's found himself in a bed instead of the battlefield. He wonders if everything just now was a dream. He's also shocked that he's still got his head on his shoulders, because bro did get the Aaron treatment. Anyway, his appearance seems to have changed. He also doesn't have any noticeable wounds on his body. The place he's resting seems unrecognizable, which makes him wonder if this is some kind of foreign country. Countless questions flood his mind because not even magic is capable enough to resurrect someone. After all, if he knew about that, he would have simply revived Katarina. There's no logic that makes it reasonable for him to be alive. All of a sudden, he sees Lakan's portrait inside the room, annoyed to have found it here. The butler barges in to check on the young master's condition. He's pleasantly surprised to find him awake at last. The butler embraces him, claiming that he was knocked out for 2 whole weeks, marking the end of the last Lakan of the family. Too many things are happening at once, so Seaman straightforwardly asks about the man's identity. This comes as a shock to the butler, who realizes that his master fails to recognize him. He collapses on his knees, tragically accepting that his master must have lost his memories from the accident. Sorrowfully, the butler decides to share what happened from the beginning. He thinks that it might help the young master to remember things and regain his memory. First off, this dude is supposed to become the Lord very soon. He's the successor to the Lakan Viscounty of the Baroque Empire. Not to mention, he has succeeded the great hero Lakan's family line. Lo and behold, this is Luke of the Lakan family, and you can just see the what the fuck is happening look on our boy's face. Seaman stands in utter disbelief. The realization that Lakan died over 500 years into the past is shocking to him. This means that he's reincarnated far into the future and right into the family line of the man he cursed before his death. Words fail to escape his mouth, as he tries to escape as fast as possible. The butler tries to stop him, but Seaman is overwhelmed with too much and reaches for the door to confirm reality for himself. He thinks he's being played for a fiddle because it shouldn't make sense in any way. As soon as he reaches for the door and opens his new world, Lacan finds himself chanting how nothing makes sense, offering his confusion to the world. But to his shock, he sees a giant knight the size of a golem. His posture shrinks, prompting him to question what the fuck is before his eyes. After all, with this creature in sight, it only adds weight to other butler's words and confirms everything he said earlier. Noticing the intricate details of the creature, Seaman realizes that it's even a step ahead of his golem magic. It's a magic that could only be envisioned in his imagination, and yet it towers before him in real life. The butler catches up to him as Seaman asks for his name. He's called Hans, so Seaman quickly asks what he's staring at. Hans explains that the monster before his eyes is called a gigant, a humanoid weapon with mobile capability. This makes him wonder if it was made using golem magic. Hans confirms that his thoughts are partially correct, because giants undergo through the process of hextech technology paired with magic. Since technology has jumped in advancement, giants are different from golems because they can be piloted by a human inside of them. Think of Pacific Rim or Code Geass, or just any mecha anime that comes to mind. It's basically that. Seaman is shocked that a human is supposed to go inside of a giant weapon like that. He collects his thoughts about the things he learned and finds it a brilliant invention of humanity. Not only is it immune from external damage, it could also react faster compared to the limitations of the golems. In effect, Seaman thinks that it takes care of all the weaknesses he faced with his golem magic. He decides to turn back and walk away before coming to a stop. Seaman believes that this confirms Hans's words, which means he has surely reincarnated half a millennia into the future. But the question is, why did he reincarnate into a family line of the man he deemed his enemy? The scene cuts to this guy going crazy on drinking alcohol. Even the butler thinks he's overdoing it, but I can't blame Seaman for looking like a drunkard. Dude is battling with so much to understand. He argues that it shouldn't matter for him to drink this much since he's the healthiest he has ever been. Life decides to give this idiot a reality check as Seaman collapses to the ground. He feels an overwhelming ache, while Hans tries to calm him down. And now for the plot twist, it turns out that the Lacan family suffers from a curse. The word curse shocks Seaman, confirming Hans's thoughts that his master really doesn't remember anything. Seaman curiously inquires of him further. Hans decides to go down the lengthy explanation of how the war started. Seaman asks him to stop yapping and get to the point. Long story short, Lacan soon passed after his fight against the Demon King, mainly because of the curse that was left by him. It doesn't make any sense to Seaman, because he doesn't remember doing anything like that. He just remembers shouting an angry confession instead of it being a real curse. 500 years into the past, the world faced against the unstoppable Demon King's army, who could summon dangerous golems to annihilate kingdoms. This man became responsible for ending many lives, and it seemed like the world would soon fall under his destruction until the hero Lacan surfaced and plunged his blade. The world recovered its peace, but because of the Demon Lord's curse, the condition overwhelmed Lacan, jeopardizing his life as well as the bloodline of his family to die at a young age. Seaman closes the history book, having learned everything in detail now. In reality, he didn't even cast a stupid curse, and something like that isn't supposed to last centuries into the future anyway. Still, he has himself to blame for losing the fight. The only frustrating part is that he gets to be born in his enemy's family line. It almost makes him feel like he's the one being cursed. Seaman reaches for another book to refuel himself with knowledge. It's a second chance for him to make things right. He doesn't want to meet Katarina without having accomplished his true objective. There's the fact that the world could have gotten infinitely more corrupt in the past 500 years. That's why Seaman is still prepared to gather his followers and learn everything there is to know about the current state of the world. If he manages to unite his followers, he could really prevail this time around. With another book tossed, Seaman drinks like a maniac and realizes that the task is more difficult than he assumed. Drunk as a damn addict, he thinks most people don't even remember the Demon Lord to begin with. There's nothing in history that marks his significance anymore, topping it with the fact that his current body is literal dogshit for having no mana or stamina. It's impossible for him to even walk as Seaman slips and collapses with a thud. Planted on the floor, he wonders what his next plan of action should be. Guilt and grief overcome him, remembering that he may not be able to achieve anything for his lover in his second life. All he wanted in the end was to reform the world into a better and equalized place. His wallowing misery is cut short as a voice asks for their master. Seaman checks outside the balcony to see what's going on. There, he sees the merchants who are protesting to share an audience with him. One of them is a branch master called Darren. All of a sudden, our boy realizes that he's the one in debt. a fate that all of Lacan's descendants have to suffer. The merchant loudly proclaims 30,000 pesos as the amount that was borrowed last year for the construction of a mine. Darren is pissed that he avoided them all this time, refusing to return them the amount. The butler reasons, arguing the young master's condition, and assures the merchant they will repay the amount. However, Darren has had enough. This cheeky bastard is in it from the money and only wants the opinion of the noble himself. From their reactions, the clever merchant has assumed that they won't be able to return the amount. He leverages this opportunity to strike them an offer. He's willing to take the prized gigant of the family in exchange for the money, believing that it costs even less than what he's owed. His offer is met with uproar, as one of the knights of the family claims that they've only got 3 gigants, and taking away even one would render their territory defenseless. Rogers is extremely rebellious against the trade, and is willing to give up on his life instead of the gigants. The accountant Dixon has a counteroffer. He thinks they could raise taxes for a while to collect the money and return it to the merchant. However, it turns out the people of the territory are already suffering, so there's no way they could introduce more economic instability. Rogers is firm in his response, claiming that it's simply not possible to accept this condition. Meanwhile, Seaman is having the time of his life, because he's satisfied that the hero's family has to go through so much misery over the curse he placed. Suddenly, the merchant tells them to calm down. Darren explains that he wants control of the gigant, but he also doesn't want to be branded as the guy who took from the hero's house. Instead, he points to the gigant, offering a trade. It comes as strange to Rogers because they just argued that the gigant is out of the question. Darren explains that they misinterpreted his point. He doesn't want the weapon, but rather the control of the magic tower right behind. Now for this, Rogers is a little less frustrated about it. It's a reasonable trade instead of taking a gigant, especially since it's useless. Humpty Dumpty the accountant shares that it's no longer a tourist attraction either. It seems useless to them, but Seaman is out here shitting himself, because that magic tower actually belongs to him. This guy Lacan literally built an entire manor in the same battlefield where he beat the Demon King. 5 centuries ago, the Demon King erected a magical tower in this land. This place was much farther away from where the mage was situated. He lived here with Katarina. This place was broken down and tattered, but for the two of them, it seemed like a place of comfort, the perfect resting spot for the banquet of their dreams. Unfortunately, now that same tower is about to be lost, infuriating him greatly. Darren emphasizes that his company will refine the tower and make it a brilliant tourist attraction. This way, the economy will also take an uprise, allowing the greater benefit of the territory. Dixon is prepared to sign up when all of a sudden, a giant rumbling startles them. The young lord is pissed and making his way outside. He demands them to move out of the way and confronts the sleazy merchant. Dixon tries to act like he cares about his health and explains how they were in the middle of negotiations and about to get the signature going. Enraged, Seaman calls him a blabbermouth who's only good at talking crap without weighing the significance of the demon tower. He's infuriated at the mere suggestion of Dixon taking control of it. His unusual temperament scares the merchant shitless because he wasn't expecting him to react this way. The merchant attempts to speak ambiguously, but our boy isn't having any of it. Taking the magic tower would be similar to marking control over the center of their territory. He has already uncovered Darren's plan to extend his influence and authority. Darren is rather shocked that he thought so far ahead and argues that his assumptions are baseless. Seaman can't stomach the fact that he's trying to take over their territory, comparing him to be even worse than incompetent people as merchants are only looking out for themselves. Darren's situation has flipped over its head. He knows he has to respond with something credible and reasonable, but instead, he opens his mouth and reminds Seaman about their unpaid debt. After all, it makes sense for the company to get what it is rightfully owed. Interestingly, Seaman declares that they do intend to pay the company's debt. He's ready to hand over every last penny in 10 days. He unleashes his anger and demands the merchant to leave now. Darren is too scared to speak and runs away, hoping that the young master will be firm with his words. With him gone, Seaman thinks that merchants are all the same. Rogers is impressed by their young master's control of the situation. The vassals are collectively touched to the point of tears by their master's incredible foresight. They are also awed by his loyalty to their ancestors' accomplishments. Seaman doesn't get what they're on about, because he did it for himself. Rogers is beaming with joy for maintaining honor of the Lacan house. After all, the merchant was proven helpless against their master's response. They could almost envision Lacan's spirit inside him. Little do they know, it just pisses Seaman even more. It's tempting him to become the Demon King again. Anyway, Butler Hands is intrigued how he's going to return the money, especially with the hefty amount in mind. Hands compares the money to 10,000 wheat sacks or a single gigant unit. The thing is, they can't even seek help from other merchants right now, which means they'll have to come up with a different plan. Seaman expresses that if that's everything his vassals could offer to him, then they're practically useless. He rejects their help and intends to resolve the debt on his own. He's got no assets and definitely no facilities to provide. Food is scarce too. There's practically nothing that seems to work for him. Frustrated, Dude is starting to question if this is the same household responsible for slaying the Demon King. He's really pissed that there's absolutely nothing for him to use in the time of need. He even accuses the vassals for stealing the amount. Hans is a little shocked he even laid down that accusation. He points to the history of things for reference. Right after slaying the Demon King, Lacan's house was bestowed with a title of Marquis, and he shared a huge cut of the territory in the kingdom. It still doesn't make sense to Seaman. The butler continues, explaining how the Duke Baroque decided to venture a rebellion against the kingdom of Livia. Viscount Lacan was responsible for facing this injustice, but in the end, he's the one who fell victim to the curse of the Demon King, leaving things halfway as he suffered a crushing defeat. With that, the title of Marquis was quickly revoked, and this man was exiled to the borders of the kingdom. Terry Lacan silently passed away with his waning health. All of a sudden, it seems like Lacan never intended to have his territory built near the tower. Seaman is worried about the critical financial condition of their household. It doesn't make sense how it ran for 5 centuries. He wants to know what happened. Hans comes to address that part as well. Turns out that his ancestors intended on regaining glory and restoring the Lacan family to its heights. In order for that comeback to happen, those idiots expunged their resources for their cause. This Manat using up all of the assets and authority they had just to recover the reputation of the Lacan household. However, the cures stayed prominent among the family, passing all the way down. No amount of hard work could ever remedy their struggles, as it was all in vain. That is what became of a glorious house, of the hero who saved the world from doom. Hans is regretful to remind the young master that he lost consciousness due to a gigant incident recently. It also happened because of Luke attempting to tirelessly restore the household's reputation like the rest of the descendants, to show the world that he also possessed the qualities of the hero, but it led to overexerting himself. Hearing this, Seaman gets up from his seat and assesses the current situation. There's basically nothing they could do to save their skin. Hans is once again regretful to mention his helplessness, apologizing to his master. Surprisingly, Hans decides to maintain his hope and is willing to ruin his life all for the sake of gathering the amount. However, Seaman is uninterested in anything sacrificial like that. Instead, he's got a plan of his own. With a sinister look on his face, Seaman realizes that all they have to do is repay the money in any way possible. Well, in the next scene, we get an idea of what he meant. The vassals are shocked as Seaman has pulled out the glorious movie of removing the statue of the hero Lacan. Every single servant is dreading the fact that he sold the statue for the amount. Hans is stunned to find that the statue is missing and wonders where it could have gone. More importantly, he wants to have a chat with his master first. Suddenly, one of the guards comes to inform them about a new problem. Turns out that Seaman left the estate right when the guards were at their weakest. Hans collapses, realizing what's going on. He just can't place a finger on his master's plans. We get a shot of a carriage carrying the large statue and Seaman boarded along, being a drunk idiot. The coachman has been dying to ask a question. Seaman doesn't remember him, so Philip nervously introduces himself as his guard knight. He wants to know if Seaman is truly bent on selling the statue. That's what he's planning at least. Philip tries to remind him of the statue's rich history of surviving 5 centuries of legacy. But this dude just doesn't care. Because the important thing is the present. Philip warns him that he won't be able to pay the debt based on one statue. However, Seaman already knows that and claims he's got a larger plan in place. The guard knight is satisfied to hear that and thinks that it will all be understandable as long as he succeeds. Seaman finally reveals his grandiose plan, which is that he's going to use the money from the statue to gamble his way to acquiring 30,000 pesos. Yes, what a plan. Philip is really starting to worry now, and he's forced to stop the carriage. He warns the young master against crafting such a dangerous plan. Seaman doesn't get why he's traveling along with him if he's out here lecturing him on every little thing. Philip reminds the idiot master that he got dragged along without choice. He wouldn't have ever taken him here if he knew the plan about gambling. Poor guy even recommends turning back and coming up with a new plan. Seaman thinks he's one hell of an idiot, reminding the man that if they were to turn back now, he would have to face the allegations of attempting to sell the statue for gambling money. They would just never forgive him and could seriously expel him from the household. Philip is stunned to hear his words. Seaman thinks they won't be able to do much regardless since he's the young lord, which means the only person to get kicked out would be Philip himself. Poor guy feels a shiver run down his spine. The young master advises him to choose wisely for himself, and wonders if he's interested in becoming a vagrant who doesn't have cash to spare, or on second thought, he could become the hero who helped restore the family's honor. Philip realizes he doesn't have much of a choice and thinks it's better to keep moving. The young master is delighted to hear that. The guard knight certainly wasn't expecting this much of a shift in the young master's demeanor, comparing him to the devil. The scene shifts to the shore side. 5 minutes are left until their departure. The guard knight is uncertain until Seaman reminds him of what's going to happen when they go back. They step foot inside the ship as it begins journeying the beautiful sea. Nearby is the harbor city Lamer, which looks impressively stunning at night. The ship has made its way here. Philip attempts to negotiate with a bunch of hard knocks who aren't willing to pay much for the statue. Seaman calls for his attention and requests that he lead the way. He's fine with what the money they got for the statue. Seaman is surprised to see the city change so much, prompting a question from Philip, who asks if he's been here before. Seaman ambiguously confirms, and adds that the place was quite different back then. After all, they could never come here due to a large kraken blocking their way. It was nothing more than a deserted island of sorts. The passage of 500 years is really setting in for the Black Mage. Still, he's glad to have come here, as it was Philip's idea. He emphasizes that the city has gone through many changes, becoming the second biggest in the southern region and always revolutionizing. Before it was just an unreachable island due to sea monsters stopping the development and exploration. However, soon after magic and technology advanced ahead, the place jumped in its population. There's also the fact that there's lots of gambling going around here, which he recommends for his master. Seaman emphasizes that he's extremely confident, which is why he's here in the first place. The duo stands before a golden palace, ready to head inside. The guard knight stops him for a moment. Poor guy is so anxious he needs some time to settle. Philip can't believe that he's so calm, and wonders if he's got a secret method to win. Seaman confirms with a confident face that the singular determiner of victory in gambling is one's attitude. After heading inside, reality falls apart. Seaman is just losing like a dog. He's starting to understand just how corrupt gambling really is. Things are getting troublesome for him. His opponent claims that he's stealing all of the luck. Seaman argues that one's ability is also part of the game, but this just makes the man break into laughter. He's glad to play the game against a young lord like him. At the same time, it turns out Seaman has completely emptied his slot. However, he's still not prepared to end the game. He demands Philip to exchange the remainder of the amount into coins. The guard knight is horrified because if they lose this, they're done for good. Seaman roars at his servant, which is a good thing to his opponent who senses his frustration. Seaman decides to go all in on the amount. Philip has just accepted the fate of the family at this point. It seems insane to even his competitor, who is slightly nervous to face him now. Seaman explains that he isn't anxious about the outcome since it won't change anything. Impressed, they decide to reveal each other's cards. The guy ends up rolling eighths of 3 suits, so he's more than confident in his victory now. However, Seaman stops him right before he takes the money. After all, he has yet to reveal his side. Shockingly, this guy pulled royal spades paired with an ace. The man is shocked, while Seaman is happy to have caused such a game-changing reversal. He extends his hand as a sign of victory. Philip is out here acting like he supported our boy from day one, when in reality he was pissing his pants. Slamming his fist on the table, the gambler accuses him of cheating. Seaman wonders if he's referring to the assistants behind him, which were responsible for exposing Seaman's cards and giving his opponent an advantage. The man is shocked that he came to realize that he was cheating. Seaman reflects that he knew immediately. The people around them were all manipulating the game, and they were even passing him cards. The reason he continuously fell for their tricks is because he was attempting to come in contact with every single card. He left a tiny trace of mana on each card, allowing him to control the draw when he really wanted. After all, for someone who commanded the advanced Golem army, something like this is nothing. He's confident to win every single match without using sneaky tricks. Seaman wants the man to simply acknowledge his loss and get done with it. However, the gambler refuses to play around in fairness and reveals his true nature. Behind Seaman, that man's subordinates whip out weapons to beat him up. Seaman bickers his annoyance with the fact that these clowns remain the same even after 500 years. While he does not possess the same amount of mana he used to, it's still more than enough to take care of these scumbags. Preparing a spell in his hand, Seaman prepares to take them all down, inviting them to attack him. The guard knight commands his master to duck as he whips out his blade and slashes many bodies. He insults the man for ever wielding a sword against the last heir of the Locken family. The guard knight believes that it's just fitting for them to receive punishment in death if they're prepared for such a cause. Hearing this, the gambler shrinks in shock, realizing that he's committed an unforgivable sin. Philip raises his blade against the whining man who still tried attacking his noble. All of a sudden, the situation seems to be in favor of Seaman, who didn't really have to involve himself in the fight to de-escalate the situation. Fast forward to them coming out of the casino. They've racked up more than 10,000 pesos in one go. At this point, Seaman is assessing the capabilities of his vassal, who he underestimated to be just a simple porter. Turns out he's got impressive sword talent too. Still, the earnings they got today were good enough. However, the same strategy may not work for long, as it may raise suspicion from the gambling houses. Planning for countermeasures, Seaman asks if there's any place else where money can be made aside from gambling houses. Philip thinks about it for a moment and recommends visiting the Gigant Arena, a place the Black Mage has never heard of. The guard knight confirms that there are battle arenas designed specifically for giants to fight each other in the form of entertainment. The outcome of the match determines the prize money, but if you're good with your performance, it could help them earn way more than just 30,000 pesos. Seaman contemplates the idea for a second. He's already established an interest in giants, and since they're channeling some of the golem magic, it may be possible to manipulate the outcome. The guard knight encourages his master to believe in his words since he was once a top student of the Gigant Military Academy. Seaman is good with the idea, so he wants him to lead the way. As they're making their way, one of the guards is beating down a commoner for causing some kind of trouble. Philip is disgusted by their behavior for beating up a young child. This sight is a lesson for Seaman, who realizes that even after 500 whole years, some things about the world still remain unchanged. It was just the truth that certain things became worse versions of what they used to be with the passage of time. Frustrated at the sight, Seaman speaks his thoughts. But before he's able to finish, someone else cuts him off and tells the guards to stop. There's a woman who reminds the royal guards of their duty to protect the subjects instead of mercilessly beating them. Seeing this woman's sight, Seaman is utterly stumped. Her face, her voice, and her beliefs, they match with Katarina. The woman speaks her heart for the safety of the children. In this life, this woman seems to be a princess. The royal guards express that it's an order given by the count himself, so there's no use. People are becoming anxious because all of the refugees are leaving the city. The princess counters, questioning if these men believe in the idea of treating others like cattle, in an environment where the basic human needs aren't even met. Seaman's eyes widen as he hears her words. The woman adds that many children have already lost their families, and if they are deemed guilty, then she's the one to take personal responsibility first and get punished ahead of them. Before being a princess of the Volga Kingdom, she considers herself one of the refugees seeking exile. Against her words, the guards prove useless, yet annoyed that her way of doing things will complicate matters. They express their personal frustration as they're being ordered from above instead of their own hearts. Philip chimes in to ask the young master if they should stay for a while. Seaman is stunned and questions the identity of the woman. The guard knight explains that his woman is famous in the Volga Kingdom for always speaking her mind and against the cruelty of nobles. Her own kingdom fell to ruin for strange reasons, and not even Philip would have ever thought to encounter Princess Reina in this city. The word Reina gets stuck down his throat. Seaman is expressionless yet full of emotion at the same time. In every conceivable reality, the woman in front of her looks identical to Katarina. He wonders if she was also reincarnated, but that doesn't explain how she looks the exact same while he doesn't. The royal guards intervene and force their way into stopping Princess Reina. They don't have any choice either, because they'll get punished for disobeying orders. Reina frees herself only to get smacked out of impulse. This very sight wakes up the devil inside of this man, as Seaman lunges forth to bash the shit out of the guard. Beating down the man senseless with one punch after another, Seaman claims that he doesn't care if the history of the world changed or not, because scumbags like these people will always exist. For some persistently annoying reason, they never disappear no matter the era. At last, Princess Reina jumps in to stop his rampage, helping the man reclaim his senses. Reina expresses that he doesn't have to go through the trouble of doing so much. Seaman is still fixated on Katarina when all of a sudden, the other royal guard waves his sword at him for raising his hand against a guard and breaking the imperial law. Philip mockingly asks if the imperial law matters more than a human's life, and he's already put his sword against the man's neck, so it's checkmate. With that, the matter is settled as the guards walk away defeated. Unfortunately, now they won't be able to visit the Gigant Arena because of the trouble that was stirred just now. Seaman goes crazy for Katarina, shouting her name and anxiously asking if she's hurt. He apologizes for his temper and explodes on her. But unfortunately, this woman does not know or remember him at all. Reina straight up asks about his identity. At this point, she's starting to find him a creepy man and recommends that he stay away. Seaman helplessly believes that if only he tells her what happened, she would remember his real identity. However, Reina denies any such considerations. She despises the nobles and thinks that there's no difference between him or the guards who beat up children. She also thinks he's making a critical error in his judgment for mistaking her for someone else. The woman reminds him that she's not Katarina, but rather Princess Reina. That puts a dead stop to the conversation while Philip comes rushing for the young master. He wants to clarify to the princess that they're not causing any trouble. Words become blurry. Seaman's mind drifts into the background, remembering the countless agonizing hours he spent in grief all alone, realizing that his lover would simply never return. And now, his resolve crumbled, merely because Reina and Katarina shared appearances with each other. A servant of the princess comes looking for her, reminding her that she had an important event to attend. Poor guy had to go through the trouble of finding her in a rush. Victor is annoyed to discover that she was arguing with the guards again. More importantly, he's concerned about the men standing next to her. Reina fills in the gaps and explains that it's their first encounter. Victor reminds them not to get close with the princess. Seaman expresses the sheer stupidity of things. He believed he was the one responsible for escalating the situation, but in the end, the reality is, he helped her regardless of his later reaction. Seaman clarifies that he didn't look for anything in return, but this woman doesn't even have the heart to thank him for his effort. He has the princess speechless and unable to respond. Seaman turns around, ready to leave them alone. The princess and her butler are also about to go, but a thought bothers her. She confesses that the noble is indeed correct. She didn't even thank him just now. Let's cut to the Gigant arena. The commentators are riling up the crowd with the intense matchup going on. Right when everyone is cheering in joy, Seaman and Philip decide to take a seat. The fight is finished with one Gigant mauling the other with a powerful swing of its axe. With the final attack dealt, Adolf is declared the victor of the match. Apparently, Seaman has been placing bets on Gigants and consistently winning out without any troubles. Even he believes that it's too easy because the Gigants are based on fundamental golem magic. This easily helps him determine the victor of the match thanks to the flow of mana coursing through the creatures. The commentators talk about how the upcoming match seems like a bloodbath to come. Philip is confident that they'll be able to predict the next match. He's confident in Savage's victory against Sting, since they boast winning and losing streaks respectively. Savage has the clear advantage, but Seaman thinks the match will be cut short and finish quickly. Introducing the monstrous Gigant with a consistent winning streak. The dual axe-wielding Savage. His opponent is someone that shockingly stole a victory from someone in their previous encounter. This revelation surprises Seaman because the rest of the crowd calls him a lucky Gigant, and nothing more. Sting is introduced as a tattered Gigant, much smaller in size. The second Seaman sees this Gigant, he decides to place all of his bets on Sting, which seems like the worst decision ever in this situation. Philip thinks his master has lost his damn mind after all. Savage is a monster compared to the lucky Gigant. However, Seaman is sure to have seen something and believes in the future where Sting will prevail. The match is quick to begin with Savage's first outlash, but for some reason everyone is shocked that Sting is managing to keep up blow for blow. The little guy is shattering expectations of everyone who downplayed him. He's countering each attack. Savage is impressed with his abilities, but at that moment he decides to stop messing around and unleashes his fury. Philip is crying his eyeballs out because they've bet all their money on Sting. Seaman, on the other hand, believes that contrary to everyone's expectations, Sting is channeling way better control of mana. It just doesn't make sense to him how the Gigant refuses to unleash its mana's capabilities. Sting has just lost an arm and is inches away from defeat, while Savage looks him down for accepting defeat. Raising his dual axes, this behemoth prepares to destroy its opponent in a final swing. Once more, poor Philip is out here having a panic attack while his master is as cool as a cucumber. The axes descend upon Sting, but in that critical moment, something happens as sparks of electricity begin surfacing around the Gigant. Savage's attack connects with the ground, but his opponent is nowhere to be found, prompting him to get confused. The so-called lucky Gigant finally speaks, claiming that bets can always be adjusted in Gigant matches up until 30 seconds. With that time frame finished, now he can go full strength without worrying about any repairs. This means Sting was intentionally holding back to make sure he received the most amount of money when he won. The Gigant releases an incantation circle, which descends a column of fire upon his opponent. Savage is getting grilled to the bone, causing a shocking upset among the crowd and in the arena. They can't believe that their prize champion is getting knocked around despite his high win percentage. In the end, the victor of the fight is Sting, the underdog who became the new champion, while Savage is turned to crisp. Philip cries tears of joy because he never expected them to win. Meanwhile, Seaman is stunned to find out that Gigants are actually capable of activating magic spells. Such a thing shouldn't even be possible in his worldview. Philip explains the confusion. It turns out that Karen, the person piloting Sting, is a rune knight. It's not exactly uncommon to see Gigants capable of using magic. However, they intentionally hide their strength to raise the odds of winning. But that's not the thing bothering our boy. He's perplexed because the fundamental theory of magic was constructed by him, and it's so unique in its essence that no amount of time could have modified it. The reason is simple. It's because of the fact that it was completed with the help of black magic. The scene cuts to the Gigant hangar. The guard knight doesn't get why they're here and emphasizes they should return as soon as possible. However, too many things are bothering Seaman at the moment, and he's getting tensed up. They coincidentally bump into Victor, who is arguing against Reina from participating in the match. The fight's odds are against her, but Reina believes in her mercenary Andre, who could easily pilot Mir to defeat the Count's Gigant. Seaman notices that they're stuck in problems of their own. Victor questions what led to her decision to accept a reckless duel. The harsh condition is that she'll have to marry the Count in the case she loses. However, this girl is defiant in her cause and claims that she did it for the refugees, who would have starved to death otherwise. Her goal is to save everyone she loves, And this outcome, even though it places her in trouble, is the only way. Her butler can't accept her becoming a sacrificial pawn for the benefit of others, especially considering the fact that they have a broken gigant, so there's just no chance of victory. Victor understands her cause to help the refugees, but is against the decision to put her own life on the line. Ignoring their senseless chatter, Seaman prefers to take his leave as he's heard enough. He wants to return home at once. As he's walking, the mage assures himself that the woman is definitely not Katarina, so he has no reason to involve himself. That is until he hears how the princess is risking selling her freedom, especially when the Count is a ruthless man who has already threatened the refugees many times. Orange Hair over here reminds her that if they don't replace the Mana Stone, the gigant is far from being operable to begin with. And if it was operable, the difference in their models is too vast. The Count's gigant will decimate Reyna's in an actual fight. So in this case, he advises that she heed to her butler's advice. Stubborn as a rock, Reyna persists in her ambition, claiming that she can't swallow defeat without even trying. The helpless situation moves her to tears as she questions who will be the one responsible for helping the weak, if not her. At last, a voice of hope speaks, inquiring if he should figure things out. Reyna turns to find the noble, who is of the opinion that both the gigant and its mana stone can be utilized. Victor comes out with a sword in hand to protect the princess from the creeps. He thinks the situation is far too coincidental and suspects them to be assassins of the Count. His words are really pissing off Seaman here, while the guard knight tries to explain about who they're really dealing with, which is the 15th descendant of the Lacan family. Victor is perplexed to hear that these men belong to the hero's family, and he's still suspicious of them. But now Reyna wants her butler to put her blade down. She apologizes for what happened earlier and realizes that they've heard the conversation before. She doesn't want to admit that she doesn't have any other options, but it's just the reality. Reyna wants an additional favor from this man. Seaman is happy to hear her out, and this time, he's going to make sure to showcase his skills instead of talking about who he is. The mage works with the gigant, while the repairman explains how futile their efforts are going to be, since the machine is basically inoperable. They're afraid that this guy might end up damaging the gigant instead, and chalk it off to a noble's high ego. So the guard knight uses this opportunity to make a bet with these fellows. He wants to wager 10,000 pesos on his young master fixing the gigant, something not even the iron mages like them were able to fix. Of course, it's an incredibly ridiculous offer, but Philip has the advantage here, and simply calls them cowards for not standing by their words. All of the sudden, Reyna asks Philip an important question. She can't help but see why a tiny little dagger like the one in Seaman's hand is capable of fixing gigants. Seeing this, even Philip's confidence cracks because he doesn't get what his master is going to do with a tool like that. Seaman attempts to slice the gigant's head, receiving surprise from Philip, who realizes this is no good at all. Turns out he sliced off his hand to draw blood and is confident in what's about to happen. Extending his hand, Seaman casts a myriad of red magical circles with all of his might. With the manipulation of magic completed, the mage calls out to the gigant and demands it to arise. I think that's a solo leveling reference right there. The magic tower of the Demon King Seaman. At one point, he stood on top of the world with his golem army. Seaman did not allow for them to rest for even a moment, deeming them immortal beings who exist to destroy their enemies. That's when he commanded them to rise up from their defeated states, empowering the golems with black magic and resurrecting them again. The same goes for the glowing gigant that is now brimming with a pool of mana. Philip celebrates like his biggest fan, while the rest of the iron mages are in utter disbelief. Even Reyna can't believe how this man was able to awaken a gigant in that state. The fact that a person was able to revive a dead magic crystal is unbelievable. No one had heard of this level of magic in their lives. If only the entire world witnessed the glory of Seaman's magic, they would be celebrating human advancement and revolution. Philip is now convinced that his master is capable of doing anything he pleases. On the other hand, the Iron Mages refuse to acknowledge what he just did, calling it the works of black magic. Pissed as hell, Philip turns to them with a murderous look on his face, questioning if they are really accusing the Lacan family of using black magic at this moment. The Iron Mages stand their ground, so Seaman chooses to explain what happened. He chalks it off as a secret technique passed down by the Lacan family, a technique that was hidden for 500 years. Hearing this, the Iron Mages still can't believe how a swordsman family is equipped with secret magic techniques all of a sudden. Reyna doesn't want to argue the details of what happened. She believes that even if it was the use of black magic, it helped save many lives in the process. She finds herself grateful and indebted to him and extends an apology for her reaction last time. Seaman is okay with what happened because it's only reasonable she was wary of him. Reyna draws near him to clean the blood from his hands, begging him to give her this opportunity to help him. Seaman is okay with her doing that, so long as it relieves her in some way. Their conversation is interrupted by one of the vassals working for Reyna. The man has exhausted himself just coming here. He wants to let everyone know that the mercenary Andre has gone missing, no longer to be found in the lodging or the waiting rooms. The scene switches to Count Monarch, who has manipulated the battlefield by winning over Reina's rider. Now she's left with no one, and she can't fight either, despite having repaired the Gigant. There are questions being raised about the Gigant's sudden activation. For that, his own servant is bashed for his incorrect assessment. He begs for another chance to make things right, but the brutal Count Monarch is disgusted by his mere presence and tells him to fuck off, basically. Monarch wants to know about any other details that may have slid under the table. He doesn't want any interruptions stopping him from acquiring Princess Reina as his bride. The man believes that he will teach everyone a lesson on what he's truly capable of in this upcoming fight. Back to the Gigant Arena, the most anticipated match of the day is here. Princess Reina's mirror will be facing Count Monarch's Achilles. The golden magnum opus of the Count is the city's champion, boasting nearly 80 victories as its winning streak without even enduring a single loss. This guy is the Michael Jordan of his sport. The commentators were eagerly anticipating Meyer's arrival, but it seems like the Gigant hasn't shown up yet. It seems like Princess Reina has abandoned the match, which is why the crowd has a displeased and harsh reaction for their wasted money. Monarch is glad that she gave up because she couldn't find a rider to operate. He feels pity for her not accepting his marriage proposal right away. Let's revisit the situation with our gang before the fight. They came to learn that Andre was missing thanks to the Count's trickery. Even though Andre is supposed to be a loyal vassal of the family, it seems like he's betrayed them in the end. Reina's face is full of horror, but there's still the glaring issue regarding the Gigant's difference in strengths. The princess's body trembles, unable to accept that this man stooped so low. Seaman becomes the voice of reason and asks if she will be forced to marry him by default if she abandons the match. That's why, despite his intrusion, he wants to help him in this sticky situation as well. Reina can't stomach the fact that he's going so far for no reason. The same goes for Philip, who wants to remind the young master about the accident that knocked him out for a month. Seaman expresses that he's not worried about something like that because he's got a different plan in mind. And now, we cut back to the battle arena, where the valiant Mir is making its way right in the nick of time. The commentators are proud that the warrior refused to turn tail despite facing an unstoppable monster. Monarch is now extremely pissed, because his informants told him Reina didn't have any other riders to spare. His servant tries to explain that there really wasn't anyone, which makes him wonder if she ended up hiring a mercenary at the last second. Monarch can't believe that a rogue mercenary would go out of his way to support the princess instead of taking his side in his own territory. Victor and Reina arrive just in time before the match begins. She's glad that they were able to make it, but it still doesn't confirm their victory. There's the problem regarding the performance of each individual Gigant, and then there's the fact that the rider operating Achilles is the city's champion. However, Seaman thinks they'll be just fine. While it seems like his guard knight is nothing more than a clown, the man is extremely skilled as a pilot, and he's excited to participate in the fight. The unexpected Gigant has made its arrival, but still, a number of variables are against its odds. The crowd is underwhelmed by Mir's size and specs, because they don't think it's capable of taking down the strongest there is. The entire arena roars in a giant laughter, and suddenly believes that they should have run away instead. Mir is regarded as a piece of junk that can't even move an inch from where it stands. Achilles' rider, on the other hand, gives him praise for not running away. At the same time, it's as clear as day how this match would be decided in everyone's eyes. He has no intention of holding back against Meyer. Philip responds that he's just going to let his actions do the talking. In order to test his confidence, Achilles comes roaring with a powerful blow. Even Philip can't help but agree that Achilles is an overwhelming strength machine. Yet he lunges forth to attack, knowing that size doesn't mean everything. Don't at me in the comments. Anyway, he tries to outdo him in speed, only to get shocked that Achilles is incredibly fast with his reflexes. Mir dodges a powerful swing of his axe, sending shockwaves. Achilles is rather underwhelmed that his opponent turned out to be even weaker than he thought. The attack just now literally ripped apart the ground, a close call for Philip. He realizes just how bad the situation really is, since he's dealing with a rider with the proficiency of an expert knight. Endless attacks come flying towards Mir, who is on the back foot and barely standing ground. He dodges yet another critical swipe. The commentators remark how Mir is lasting far longer than anyone expected with his incredible speed. However, Victor is worried about the strategy since it may not last for very long. The princess tries to comfort him, reminding her butler about Philip's skill as a knight. Seaman believes in the man, knowing that he's already faced many knights before, proving his own skill. But still, seeing how Philip is basically running for his life in the battlefield, the mage thinks he needs to be taught a lesson later. He's starting to question if Achilles' rider ever gets exhausted. So this time, he forces a counterattack out of nowhere, which actually connects with his opponent. Unfortunately, the attack didn't even dent his armor, and instead has enraged Achilles even more. He decides that it's time to go all out, and unleashes his signature finishing move. The question is, can Philip really dodge this attack? Even he knows he's fucked. A loud explosion follows the attack. Achilles is stunned to find that his opponent actually dodged his ultimate strike. Mir rises from behind, claiming that Rogers would seriously kill him if he found out what he just did. After all, everything is resting on his shoulders for the young master. Channeling his mana, Philip expresses that his opponent is going to regret this fight. He unleashes his full strength and prepares his blade. Achilles' rider is shocked to find someone activating an aura. He thinks he's met a worthy opponent at last. Suddenly, Count Monac comes screaming in his ear for fooling around. He can't believe that the best of the best is facing a hard time against a junk robot. He tries to remind him of the consequences that would follow if he loses the fight. So now, the rider thinks it's time to bring out the big guns. Achilles is done playing a fair fight and lunges forth with a powerful full swing. However, Philip is done toying around and claims that there won't be another fight to begin with. As soon as Achilles' attack misses and hits the ground, Philip disappears in a flash of a second. The next thing the big guy realized was that his arm had been chopped clean. It's an impossible level of aura and speed being casted inside a gigant. Achilles' rider remembers at last that there was once an undefeated legend of the gigant arena who disappeared 3 years ago. Mir delivers the killing blow with his crackling electrical slash. As for the champion rider who disappeared is discussed to be someone from the Black Knight's phantom sword. The commentators have been left excited by the sudden upset. History has been made as Achilles is rendered incapable of fighting in moments. The undisputed winner of this match is Mir the underdog. With the crowd chanting his name, Achilles' rider is glad to have encountered the Black Knight in battle. They had once fought each other 3 years ago in the Royal Arena. Right after he set a record, the man disappeared, which makes him question why he's back. Philip explains that he is indeed the undefeated Black Knight, who wants to help others in need. At the same time, he requests the rider to keep his identity a secret. Funnily enough, the other guy is fine with that, because he knows he's getting his ass fired from his job soon. The princess and her butler celebrate the joy of victory and are moved to tears. Seaman is overall happy to have contributed to this extent, and walks away content with his actions. The dude is stoked to see the betting board. Mir's odds were specifically 21-1, and Seaman even put up the first 10,000 pesos for this risk, so now he'll reap an incredible reward. The calculated total earnings are revealed to be a staggering 210,000 in amount. Can't believe this man gambled his way to becoming Elon Musk. It's time for them to leave the city. Princess Reina is there to see them off, still grateful to everything they did for her. Seaman expresses that there's nothing to worry about as he was just trying to help. Regardless, even the princess knows that she caused trouble and doesn't have anything to show him appreciation. The noble is fine with that because he thinks they earned quite a bit of money by running into her, so it evens the trade. In all honesty, Seaman doesn't want to leave the city, but since they've caused a bunch of trouble, it may put him in danger if the people come to know that he's the descendant of the Lacan family. The princess realizes what he's talking about and apologizes for making his trip short-lived. The noble thinks it's fine for him, but for her, he recommends that she also leave the area for her own city. After all, that bastard Count Monac won't just give up so easily. Dude is currently wiping the floor with the rider who lost the fight. Victor agrees with the man, stating that they're required to leave at once. Seaman tells her that she doesn't need to worry about the refugees right now, because if she stopped here, then no one will be able to help them anyway. For the sake of a better future, Seaman thinks it's ideal to leave for now. Before he's able to finish his sentence, Reina claims that she has acknowledged the risks involved. At the same time, she doesn't want to do that, despite seeming like a stubborn hard-ass right now. She doesn't want to abandon her people without a symbol of hope. All she cares about is helping them. Hearing this, Seaman is surprised yet also impressed by her response. He wishes her well and the two exchange a handshake, looking forward to the day they run into each other again. Well, with their pressing problems regarding money solved, our boy initiates his return trip to be crowned the hero. Philip still can't believe that he willingly chose to bring the Iron Mages along, not after what they said. Seaman expresses that he did it for the lack of mages in their territory, because otherwise, there's just no way they'd be able to fix the giants in the family. Philip recommends him to fix the gigant on his own, but the young master reminds him how stupid he sounds right now. He thinks it's clear as day why Philip is a bonehead and orders him to return to Guardian their goods. Back at the Lacan estate, there's an uproar being caused by the damn merchant Darren, even though they still had some time to spare. Darren can't stomach the fact that he betrayed his own people and ran away out of nowhere. He's done waiting around. Philip comes up to him and explains that he's the escort knight who has come to speak with him. Speaking of Seaman, he's still nowhere to be found. Darren realizes that Philip has come here to deliver something. He unboxes a chest of the required amount, even though it's barely been a week since he issued an ultimatum. This also means Darren's plans to take over the Lacan territory have been cut short, with his debts completely repaid. Philip roars at the Iron Mages to collect the amount and carry it to Darren's carriage at once. The merchant is at his wit's end and tries to strike a meeting with the young master. However, the guard knight confidently brings out a letter in response. Seaman wrote the letter, describing how the merchant would try to hunt for another chance. But there's no point anymore since his debt is cleared, and he's considered nothing more than a trespasser in their territory. This time, he won't be protected by anyone, even if he causes a scene. Seaman lays down the imperial law, which emphasizes that nobles have the full right to execute any trespassers going around in their territory. This man's rage is clearly being channeled throughout the letter, and it ends with Seaman's advice to the merchant to leave, unless he wants to receive the Gojo Satoru treatment of being split in half. The merchant squeaks in terror, realizing he's got 3 seconds to bolt away. He instantly boards his carriage and runs off like a coward, cursing the young lord. Philip is satisfied with this outcome, glad to have shown just how terrifying the young master truly is. The other vassals come calling for his name. Poor guy was expecting to receive a celebratory applause from them, but instead, Rogers is straight up about to jump this man for selling the statue of their hero. They strangle him for going to such lengths and demand to know where the young master went. Philip tries to explain the situation, but these clowns aren't having it. The knight reveals where the young master is staying, and it's the place we all know about, the Demon King's Tower. He opens the giant doors, welcoming his old home that is now a mess of a place. Turning on the lights with a flick of his fingers, the mage is at least glad the structure is standing even after 5 centuries worth of abuse. Suddenly, he remembered the exact spot he and his lover used to enjoy their conversations in, the only place where Katarina lives. That's why Seaman wants to protect and endear the magic tower no matter what. However, he came here for a different reason today. Placing his hand on the wall, he wonders if this is going to work like it used to. We see an activation of a magic spell which unlocks a secret door. He's glad that it works like a charm, and the place is preserved like it used to be. Now it's time he takes what rightfully belonged to him. Descending down his labyrinth, Seaman goes on a rant on how one can easily expunge a curse. The only way to do that is to wield a stronger mana than the power of the curse itself. Or at least that is what he heard a long time ago. He comes before a room and opens it. Seaman is rather satisfied that someone protected the house in his absence. Ahead we see a small container with a red glowing object inside. Seaman is glad that it's not noisy anymore. He greets the demon Horith resting inside the container. Now let's invest 5 centuries into the past. Deep in the demonic territory, the Black Mage came in his lust for power. Activating Death Bullet, he annihilated the creatures around him, leaving him exposed to the one ruler of the territory. This demon shares an appearance similar to a human's. Horith was surprised to discover that he took down multiple fortresses with ease. She's also surprised to find out that he's quite young for his age, which is slightly disappointing, yet impressive for a talented human. That's why she's willing to show him mercy by allowing him the chance to ask anything. After all, it's only right to reward him for his effort. However, Seaman becomes very annoyed with her endless chatter and mockingly asks if a demon's yapping somehow increases their rank too. This obviously provoked Horith as he took advantage of her mercy. She thinks he's a fool for becoming arrogant after defeating low-level demons. Horith wanted to show him just how powerful the demons under her command truly are. However, not even the High Demon anticipated the Golem army to come bursting through to the magician's help. The High Demon was impressed. The battle between the golems and her guards began, as both clashed against each other, leaving just the two of them on the battlefield now. It was a mage fighting a demon. Both came swinging to kill each other at full speed. Their agonizing battle ended with Seaman standing as the victor. He intended to convert Horith's essence into demonic energy, which made her wonder about his greater ambitions to change the world. However, the ruthless Black Mage had no reason to tell her anything, and swiftly reformed her into becoming a demonic stone. He remembers the process of defeating Horith, which was one of the most difficult battles he had ever faced. In the off chance you incorrectly absorb demonic energy, it releases you into a rage state. Many people end up becoming horrifying monsters just because of that. At the time, Seaman didn't want to test his guts and absorb the power because of the risk factor involved. But eventually, he learned the correct method to absorb demonic energy. At the time, he reached the 9th circle of magic and no longer required its power. It became unused until 5 whole centuries later, with Seaman putting the stone in his mouth and absorbing it. Suddenly, a strong gush of spasms courses through his body. He feels pain and screams until Seaman discovers himself in a place called the Mind's Realm. Turns out that he survived the devouring process of the demonic energy, but just up ahead is a demon with crimson-red energy. It's Horith, and she's rather surprised to find a stranger here. There's a big problem, and it's the fact that Seaman is no longer at the same level of strength he used to be. 500 years have also passed, and yet she possesses overwhelming demonic energy. Seaman attempts to speak to her, but the demon cuts him off, questioning his identity. She takes him down in a single attack, realizing that Seaman is nothing more than a weakling of his former strength. She's confirmed who he is, which leaves the question of what he's doing here. The mage explains that he came to borrow her vessel, a rather surprising offer. Horath wonders if his bold approach will still work when his body is so weak at its current state. She's enjoying choking the man who trapped her for centuries. Not only that, he's been reduced to a fraction of his strength and wants her help. It's an entertaining sight for her. Our boy is getting choked so hard he thinks his neck is about to pop off any second. He grabs her hand and asks if she's truly fine with ending him here. After all, he came with a proposal, and she's already trying to end him. In the back of his mind, Seaman is aware of the demon's intentions to use his body. That's why she isn't injuring him gravely. Interested to hear him out, she lets him go, willing to acknowledge his bold approach and bravery. The confident high demon questions if the mage will be able to tolerate her power, especially since he's already broken his magic circle. Seaman lays out an offer that she can take over his body if he's incapable of doing that, which would be the best deal possible for her. But Horath desires a simpler means of doing things, and with a snap of her fingers, she puts Seaman's through a wave of pain. She plans to torture him for a long while, and thinks that it's justified for him to suffer this much after what he did. At this point, Seaman realizes that his body is experiencing the effects of mind control magic. Horath is sadistically enjoying his suffering. It comes to a point that Seaman passes out with just mere works of mind magic. The high demon is extremely disappointed with how weak he's become. Seaman maintains his consciousness, claiming that she's just the loudmouth he remembers. High demon doesn't get what he's scheming, since he doesn't possess the same mana or magic circle of his prime. However, Seaman expresses that despite both of those things being the truth, he's more than capable. He disappears into thin air. The mage who acquired ninth circle magic can simply never fall victim to mind control magic. We see his avatar manipulating Horath's mind instead, giving her chills from the experience. She enjoys battling him, and is even more impressed that he managed to acquire the ninth circle of magic. Seaman is happy to show her the effects, but she thinks it will be enough. What really bothers her is that, even after he obtained so much power, he couldn't achieve his goals of changing the world. However, Seaman claims that he's far from finished. His ambitions are resolute, and he will in fact change the world no matter what. Hearing this, the demon shares that while she's uncertain of how he'll use her powers, she thinks it should be okay if he has reached the ninth circle. Horath confirms that he's confident in his abilities for a reason. After all, in the likelihood she did take over his body, she could never step past the seventh circle. That's why, instead of her, she wants him to be the one to obliterate the world using her powers. Horath fades, leaving her energy in his hands, while Seaman hopes to do his best to truly accomplish his objectives. She reminds him that a second failure won't be tolerated. Seaman wakes up from the exhausting experience of having absorbed the demon crystal. He immediately activates Dark Flame to test his powers. Turns out he's still at the third circle level, but he's garnered a foundation for himself, which should be good enough for the time being. He also knows that Horath could have been able to control his body with ease, but she still decided to leave her fate in his hands. He hopes to satisfy her with his goals. Since he possesses deep knowledge about magic circles already, he thinks that restoring his powers to the ninth circle won't be as difficult as last time. Still, it will take a while for him to gather enough demonic energy to be able to do that. That's why immediate action is a must. Seaman finds his way to a different room, this time calling out for other beings who have rested well for 5 centuries. The Black Mage places his hand on the ground, activating a spell that resurrects his golems from the ground. This way, he has restored a fraction of his original powers. Back at Lemire City, we transition to Count Monarch's residence, where he is beating the crap out of his subjects. Mylon is begging for mercy as the rider who lost in the fateful match. However, Count Monarch expresses his agitation in a different context. He doesn't care about the fate of the match. Rather, he's suspicious of him secretly working under Princess Reina, especially considering the difference in the gigant specs. Mylon shouts his loyalty to the Count, claiming that he would never do such a thing as an honorable knight. However, Count Monarch isn't satisfied with those words. Mylon is about to meet his hand with a blade ready to sever his head. In one last attempt to save his own life, he claims to have knowledge on the mere gigant's rider. He talks about how he faced this warrior 3 years ago and how they were unstoppable. Mylon doesn't have any idea who they're connected with, and nobody really knows about the Black Knight's identity. Count Monarch figures that he's got nothing more useful to say, and despite his contribution just now, the poor guy loses his life while begging to be spared. One of his assistants informs him about Reina's decision to stay in the city for the safety of the refugees. The Count wants them to keep an eye on her for a while. Additionally, he wants them to investigate the rider who boarded the mere gigant. He's frustrated and wants to see this man for himself and judge if they will be an obstacle to his plans. Since a long time ago, the Lochen territory has continually thrived thanks to the nearby river and fertile lands. Yet, many have left their houses abandoned now with no signs of development. The 3 villages in this territory are close to becoming deserted ghost towns now. Seaman fixates his attention on the accountant, who he has restrained for his answers. He scares Humpty Dumpty over here, reminding him that they're responsible for putting the territory in such jeopardy. Dixon tries to clear his name, claiming that there wasn't any other way to resolve the problem, and that he did his absolute best. Seaman stands over his head with his sword raised, mocking him for his words. While he enjoys the thought of having an egghead over here hung in the middle of the town square, he's got more to ask from him. There's the fact that Dixon is an individual whose capabilities and talents are recognized by the Empire. This man turned down many other offers from other estates and chose to stick with the Lacan family despite its troubles, proving his loyalty. Seaman took it upon himself and requested the best financial books from the previous years. Dixon proved himself by fulfilling the request in one day, so he's actually quite impressed by the egghead. Dixon is happy to boast his best quality. He's good at math and can solve many problems in his head. But to the noble, this is exactly the underlying issue. Dixon doesn't get what he's referring to. The young master grabs his shirt and tosses him off the cliff as he screams for his life. Poor guy is being rolled like a cannonball while Seaman casually keeps up without any trouble. He ends up crashing on the ground and questions the meaning of such punishment. All of a sudden, Dixon sees one of the villages. The people of the Viscounty are broken, poverty-stricken, and have nowhere to thrive. Dixon can't believe it. He thought they were flourishing, so slums like these should never have come up. The young master questions how it really feels to finally see the results of his calculations. He made a critical error by trying to resolve human actions in numbers. He couldn't ever spend time with the villagers and see what was wrong with the village. So now, the resolute seaman gives him an ultimatum. If Dixon cannot find the cause of their demolished state, he will be fired at once. The accountant realizes that he's in deep trouble and quickly introduces himself as the accountant of the Lacan household. Now in Seaman's case, he's completely alright with seeing the fall of the hero's family. But for now, more pressing matters are at stake. His first mission is to improve the village so that he can eventually improve his magic circles. The scene transitions back to the family estate, where Philip is being held hostage. The vassals can't believe that the young master paid off the debt by gambling it off. They're all glad that the issue is at least resolved, but the fact that it was done through acts of gambling harms the perception of the household. The rest of the subjects are angry with the guard knight who didn't stop the young master from committing such an act. Rogers is pissed as hell, and young Philip knows he's about to catch some hands. Rogers wants to confirm if the young master's identity was exposed in Lamer City. To that, the guard knight replies that he's not crazy enough to do that. But then reality hits him. This stupid fool ended up announcing to the royal guards that they belonged from the Lacan household. Bro realizes he's stupid as hell, while Rogers can't believe he's gone to such limits. The butler, on the other hand, thinks that it's only a matter of time until people would have found out anyway, since Count Monarch's information network is powerfully vast. He's the head of the city, and nothing escapes his ears. The moment he comes to know about the Lacan household's attack, it's possible he might retaliate by sending his men. In that case, they will all be doomed with nothing to fend for. After all, Monarch is a distant cousin of the Emperor and holds extreme power. Rogers recalls how this man expanded his territory through wars, and now, he's got every reason to strike down the Lacan territory. They all wonder what the young master is planning to subdue this threat. At last, the man himself makes his appearance, sick of their speeches. He startles them with his sudden entry, and asks about the ones who were spouting the reputation of the household. Seaman inquires if they should ignore evil deeds being committed for the sake of reputation alone. Rogers argues that they're trying to be realistic about the situation, since they can't face Count Monarch's incredible army, so they just wanted to tell him that his recklessness has just put them in grave danger. Seaman finds this frustrating and asks if they also earned the title of heroes by submitting to evil people in power. He reminds them that titled heroes are supposed to fight the worst adversities known to humankind in the name of justice. The butler argues that they're doing their best every day, but in response, only the question is fired back. Did they solve all the problems? Despite their efforts, they didn't do anything, and had the audacity to judge Seaman's methods of fixing the state of the household. Still rebellious, the butler argues that people could make a big deal about the family's reputation when they discover that gambling was used as a method to pay the debt. An agitated Seaman tells him to shut up as reputation never solved a hunger crisis. He reminds them of their sworn duty to protect the people of the Viscounty, the ones who are starving with inhuman living conditions. And yet these arrogant servants think they're doing things right. Seaman is done with their bullshit and declares that he will change everything going forward. If they don't agree with him, they're shown the door to leave. The butler tries to reason with him one last time, reminding the young master about the loyal servants who have stuck by the Lacan family this entire time. However, the noble cares very little about these people. He wants to prove his determination and resolve. He commends Philip for his brilliance as a skilled captain. The guard knight thinks little of himself compared to the young master. Seaman believes that someone as skilled as him should have the right to be the knight captain. Rogers doesn't get what he's trying to say, so the noble shares what he's thinking. He wants them to duel it out for the title of knight captain. Poor Philip is begging for his life. He doesn't want to be a part of a challenge where he has to face his uncle and teacher. However, Rogers tells him to remain silent. He realizes that he's never gotten the chance to prove his skills to the young master. Seaman is looking forward to his performance. We jump ahead to the dueling arena where both fighters are gearing up for battle. It's been a few years since they last fought, but Philip is prepared to give it his all. Rogers is the same as he draws his sword. With the two swordsmen staring each other down, the fight begins. Seaman notes Philip's demeanor, realizing that he's nervous. It must imply Rogers' own strength. Since the guard knight has come to face dozens of knights in the past, Seaman is more than confident in Philip's ability. The first strike is dealt by the junior knight. His attack phantom sword connects with Rogers, or so he thought. It was blocked, though it was powerful enough to earn a compliment from his teacher. Philip assures his uncle that he's far different from what he used to be. Saying that, he dashes with such incredible speed that it leaves Rogers completely astounded. His speed forms numerous after images all around, finally revealing the real Philip attacking from behind. Rogers is starting to see the reason how Philip earned a compliment from the young master. However, he manages to foresee the attack and catch his opponent with ease, pummeling Philip into the ground. That one tackle knocked him out, but what's more, Rogers thrusted a charged kick, sending him flying in the air. Philip crashes in the arena, refusing to give up. However, the fight is already over with a blade resting against his neck. Rogers has won, decisively without using any techniques. Philip is forced to surrender, while the knight captain asks if the current display of his strength is enough to prove him worthy of being the commander. Pumped to see just what he's capable of, Seaman gives him a compliment. Let's cut to the training session. Rogers is training a bunch of his men while the young master is watching. Seaman is a little surprised that Philip lost so easily. He's having the dumbass bent over as punishment. Turns out Rogers is actually one of the 5 strongest swordsmen in the entire continent. Seaman realizes that if someone of Rogers' caliber ever decided to target him, he'd just die. He wants Philip to become his strength, and that's why he assigns him to be his official knight of escort. Hearing this, the guard knight is moved to tears because it means the young master entrusts him with much. He promises to do his best, to become the strongest and most reliable blade to protect his master. Seaman is delighted to hear that and tells him to rejoin the rest of their training. Among the 50 knights they have, 10 are considered experts. It's all thanks to the warrior family's lineage in sword mastery. Both Philip and Rogers are talents that many other estates would kill to acquire, which also shows why the family is in its current dreadful condition. That evening, the butler was shocked by the young master's actions once more. First he sold the statue, and now he's doing away with the family treasures without a second thought. The butler hollers at him for defaming the honor of the Lacan household. Seaman expresses that he's willing to do away with anything that brings him money. Slamming his hands on the table, the butler is growing tense and asks what would fuel the young master to take such a bold action. Seaman takes a moment to observe his reaction, and finally releases the truth. He wants them to know that the hero who protected them 5 centuries ago isn't going to help them anymore. The butler is offended to hear him foul the hero Lacan's legacy. However, Seaman offers a different perspective. He wants them to remember what put them in this position in the first place. It's because they believed in traditions and honoring the name of the hero. It's because of naive vassals like the butler that the family fell into ruin. Once more, the butler shifts the blame and directs it at the curse of the Demon King. Seaman points to his rebellious attitude and reminds him that their approach is wrong. They only blame the Demon King instead of focusing on their own shortcomings. The noble wants his butler to know this very well, that he will succeed the legend of the hero Lacan. That's why, if his servants are still tied to the traditions of the past, Seaman is prepared to wipe them from the history of the family. To emphasize his point, he thrusts the blade into the table. The butler Hans is left having a mental breakdown as others come for him. He remembers the day the young master was a little boy who he cared for. But now he has changed so much. The other servants are sad to see Hans in such a miserable state. Knowing how the young master frequently visits the Demon King's castle, Hans has come up with an explanation of his own. He refuses to change his attitude and still believes all of this is happening because of the curse of the Demon King. Anyway, Philip is out here begging to take Hans's advice just this one time because what he said just now was too harsh. But Seaman doesn't think much of it and believes otherwise. He isn't letting the butler have any of it, and intends to corner him as much as possible. He seems to be implying something here, but Seaman chooses not to explore that matter for now. Instead, he asks if Philip has completed the task he was assigned. The guard knight reminds his master that he's being far too loud. He was able to obtain some information from Hans. Seaman teases him by raising his voice and asking about it. Philip whispers what he found, and the scene ends there. Fast forward to Seaman and Philip visiting a captive's cell. The The noble is surprised by what he heard and what he's seeing right now. This inmate looks dead from the inside and out. Philip explains that he moved just yesterday. Suddenly, the chained man's voice demands to know their identity. Seaman feels overwhelming pressure and acknowledges the strength of a fifth circle magician, possibly even stronger than that. Channeling magical aura around his body, the man repeats his chilling question, wanting to know about their identity. The chained-up prisoner lifted his head, his lifeless eyes staring right into the young lord's soul. Luke had heard from his people that this man had been locked up in the dungeons for a long time now, but he seems just fine physically speaking. Recognizing the young lord's voice, the captive's demeanor changed into fear. Luke can't fathom why his fiefdom's sole Iron Mage is rotting away in his dungeons. Surprisingly, the Iron Mage seems upset that the young lord would step foot in the dirty underbelly of the dungeons for his sake. Luke remained cool and collected. He can't stand by and do nothing while a valuable asset is lazing away inside his territory. From the reports of the guards, it seems like the Iron Mage has been trying to harm himself by abstaining from any food or drink. He was the one who chose to get locked up in the dungeons. He believes that due to his carelessness, the gigant accident that rendered the young lord unconscious is his fault. He wishes for nothing more than to atone for that sin with his lowly life. Luke scolded him for believing that a life is only worth that much. Furthermore, it was already confirmed that the gigant accident was no one's fault. Still, the Iron Mage posits that it would not have happened in the first place if he had examined the machine more thoroughly. He wants to take responsibility for his oversight and demands to be punished. This is starting to seriously piss the Demon King off. He gets that this dude is just one of those incredibly loyal vassals, but his stubbornness is causing quite a headache. It can't be helped. Since the Iron Mage wished for it, Luke agreed to deliver justice. With stern eyes, he ordered Philip to fetch him a sword. Surprised, the guard knight could not believe what he just heard. The prisoner closed his eyes, seemingly prepared to forfeit his life for a crime he wasn't even on the hook for. Luke pulled out the blade. Since this fool practically begged him for a punishment he shall receive. The young lord raised his blade, indifference in his eyes. With one swift stroke he slashed and silence ensued. Instead of blood dripping on the floor, the sound of chains hitting the concrete can be heard. The young lord freed the prisoner by cutting the chains holding him in place. Confused, he demanded to know what the meaning of this gesture was. Luke asserted that it would benefit him more to use a talented man instead of killing one. And if there's one thing he can't stand, it's taking a loss. He is planning to work this sole Iron Mage to the bone. The level of overwork would be more torturous than death itself. So it is the Iron Mage's duty to pledge his lifelong allegiance to the young lord. He must swear it on his honor as a magician and engrave the moment onto his heart. Luke tagged Philip in to bring out what they had prepared beforehand, catching his poor guard by surprise. Philip dropped the contents of the heavy bag in front of the Iron Mage. Gold coins rained down on the dungeon floor. The man asked where the young lord got this much cash, and Luke retorted that it was not too big of a deal. They just have around 70,000 pesos to play around with. From now on, the Iron Mage must use this money in preparation for raising the magic tower. He is tasked to buy any necessary grimoires and procure the equipment required to repair and manufacture giants. Unlike the Lord of the Past, Luke plans to heavily invest in magic. It's an Iron Mage's job to make sure that incidents never happen in the process of doing so. With tears streaming down his eyes, the man cannot forgive himself for causing harm to the young lord. He doesn't know if it would be right for him to receive such goodwill. Luke was quick to correct his perception of what was happening here. This is not a form of goodwill. This is just another form of punishment. So, the old Iron Mage better strengthens his resolve. The young lord does not forgive so easily after all. After seeing his boss's radiant aura, the hopeless prisoner was moved. He kneeled on one knee and properly introduced himself as Mute, the Lacan family's Iron Mage. He swore that until the day of his death, he would devote his everything to atoning for his unforgivable sins. On the side, Philip was impressed by the rich flow of Sir Mute's incredible mana. Luke reckons that Mute is a man without a shred of flexibility, but his stubbornness can definitely serve as a sturdy beacon in times of crisis. The young lord also left the two mechanics they yanked out of Loomer in Mute's care. From the shadows, Hans continued to tail the young lord silently. He was quite impressed to see the young man convince the stubborn Mute back into employment. Hans can admit that Luke had become truly incredible after the incident. But for some reason, the old butler still feels anxious. A month later, the energy in the fiefdom had drastically shifted for the better. The family is changing, and it's happening at a rapid pace. Philip, who was far from earnest, is now training harder than anyone else. He swings his sword with a more solid purpose. Iron Mage Mute, who had hidden himself in shame due to past mistakes, is back on his feet. He is now taking the initiative to train his new recruits. While Hans and his posse were monitoring the barracks, they were interrupted by a familiar voice. It was none other than that bald accountant, Sir Dixon. It seems like he's been hard at work. The whole fiefdom was in chaos, searching for this little bald bastard. Hans has a lot of questions that need to be answered. Sir Dixon apologized for unintentionally causing a fuss, but he was gone for a good reason. It's a long story, but he believes that it would be better to show Hans what he's been up to instead of yapping. The bald little genius led Hans to the outskirts of the town, and the old man almost passed out due to shock. The slums that were once a breeding ground for misery had undergone a massive makeover. Sir Dixon elevated the impoverished area in just a month. He even established a new market in town. Unlike before, anyone is free to sell their wares now. This was decided and implemented together with all the residents. Now everyone is enthusiastic about discussing how to improve their fiefdom together. The old and inefficient traditions are getting abolished. Sir Dixon firmly believes that the fiefdom of humanity's hero is looking as it should now, lively, bright, and optimistic. Hans is still struggling with some of the changes, but the proof is right in front of him right now. The fiefdom might be trending upward, but there is no denying that everything happening now goes against 500 years of Locken family policies. Hans consulted Rogers about his gripe. The knight captain admitted that he too had the same concerns at first, but he chose to let it all go a while ago. The young lord has proven himself effective with tangible results. He's done a stellar job. Hans wanted to bring someone to his side, but Rogers had already bought into the young lord's methods. The knight captain believes that as vassals, it is their duty to place their unwavering trust in the young lord. With that said, he left the room and went straight to the training ground. Within a relatively short span of time, everyone has already been won over by the young lord's unorthodox ways. Perhaps Hans is just holding on to the past. A week later, in Luke's study, Hans organized all the documents the young lord needed for research. He felt sorry for working with the old man so much, but Hans is as reliable as can be. The torn ceiling of the study leaks while it rains outside, but the work must go on. Hans promised to resolve the issue regarding this leaky setup by the next day. If needed, the old butler even offered to repair the room himself. That's when Luke called him out for having his priorities wrong. While they endure a little downpour now and then, those who have no home to shelter from the rain are overflowing in their fiefdom. Instead of focusing on themselves, they should be thinking about their people first. It is their duty after all. The more Hans comes to know the drastically changed young lord, the more he finds that following him is the right thing to do. However, he's still unable to determine what Luke's true intentions are. So, the next night, Hans busted out his shockingly impressive parkour skills to traverse the nearby woodlands. He is trying to keep a healthy distance while carefully observing Luke, who has inexplicably entered the woods with nothing but a sack on his shoulder. Every night, the young lord secretly heads somewhere. Tonight, Hans managed to tail Luke successfully. It's an open secret that Luke's nightly excursions usually lead to the Demon King's castle. The old butler doesn't even want to consider his suspicions, but there's a real possibility that the young lord might be taken over by the Demon King's curse. But this night's excursion wasn't a castle session. Even Hans was surprised that the young lord stopped in the middle of the woods. He worried that he had been caught. Then came some gruff-looking people that the young lord inexplicably hired to do some unknown job. They boasted that the task was no harder than stealing candy from a baby. Hans recognized these men as the bandits banished from the fiefdom for their criminal plundering. As it turns out, they have been living in the woods near the fiefdom. Based on their camp, there seemed to be a lot of them. Luke was pleased with how reliable the bandits were. With his sack in hand, the young lord asked his criminal team if they could finally begin. The bandits asked if the young lord prepared a gift for them inside the sack. One of them pulled out a book and assured Luke that they made sure to understand its contents. Hearing this exchange from his cover, Hans became even more confused. Why would the young lord give those bandits a book? The old butler is too far away to hear anything else clearly. He just can't make sense of Luke's plan here. As it turns out, the bandits were just happy to finally learn how to read. Luke painstakingly summarized the plots of stories for them, making sure that they understood even the hardest parts. The citizens of the woods felt overwhelming gratitude to their young lord. Because of him, even the children in the community have learned how to read, and thanks to the food and medicine he brought, so many of those with illnesses have been cured. A bandit's wife even regained her ability to walk. They view Luke de Laeken as their community's savior and their family's benefactor. While he is glad to be of help, there is a price to everything the young lord does. But the bandits are prepared. While they may have spent their lives as criminals, they are not ungrateful animals. All Luke has to do is give the order, and the mountain bandits will do anything he asks them to do. Luke emptied his sack on the ground, revealing more literature and a mound of gold coins. From afar, Hans reckoned that his boss had probably dropped around 10,000 pesos along with the books. The bandits were confused. They understood why the books were there, but the money was quite a bit of a surprise. So Luke simply cited that the answer is inside the books. To understand what he's getting at, they better get to reading. Upon opening, one of the books is filled with documents about resident registration and land transfer. Luke just handed them official documents that acknowledge the mountain bandits as official residents of Lakan territory. With these papers, they'll have the right to claim their land as their own. Luke plans to build a town nearby, expanding his fiefdom. Hearing that they have been officially recognized as proper citizens, the bandits couldn't help but become emotional. They are criminals who have betrayed their lord. They're already grateful to Luke for helping them now and then. They think they are too far gone to accept citizenship and land ownership after everything they've done. All they know is how to steal from others for the sake of survival. Although they are grateful, they also know that the current residents of the fiefdom will never accept them. Luke is well aware of this issue, but he's not fully accepting the bandits either. Even if they had no choice, plundering is still a heavy crime in his land. However, he also recognized that the Lakan family's failing governance forced them into a life of thievery. That is a crime that Luke cannot forgive. The mountain bandits are notorious thieves, but they always avoid hurting their victims. Luke believes that they still deserve a chance to atone for their crimes. The gold in the sack is half a year's worth of payment to hire the bandits. From now on, they will become paid mercenaries. Before, they made the people of the land fear them. It's only fair that they prepare to die fighting on the people's behalf. This is their path to atonement. This is the future that the young lord wants for those neglected by the failed system. However, the path they will walk toward that future will be up to them. As a real leader, Luke is willing to put his trust in his people. Moved to tears by his impassioned reasoning, the bandits raised their weapons and vowed to lay their lives on the line to protect the territory. As far as Hans is aware, bandits within the territory are considered targets for subjugation. That is the rule of the Lakan family. Seeing how Luke resolved the problem in his own unique way, the old butler finally confronted his archaic and rigid beliefs. He realized that all he ever did was ignore the screams of the alienated. He can finally see that he is a fool who misunderstood the young lord's intentions, questioning him at every turn. Hans can finally see the light. Luke Lakan is the man who will uplift the territory to greater heights. He inwardly promised to make up for his grave mistake by serving the young lord until his bones gave in. Meanwhile, Luke was just relieved that the old man had finally let his guard down. Hans was starting to become annoying to deal with, but this little show should fix that. Finally, he said farewell to his newly hired mercenaries. The crying butler watched as he retreated back to the trail. Luke reached a clearing and heaved a sigh of relief. It was tough, but it's safe to assume that most of the people around him have been taken care of now. That means the real work can finally start. Luke took a glowing apparatus out of his bag and stared at it mischievously. Back in the Demon King's castle, Luke converted the whole place into his personal sanctuary, complete with roaming golems once more. Although he is satisfied with his progress, the nagging problem of his territory's development always comes down to cost. He managed to easily regain the trust of his people by improving their lives drastically, but the cost of doing so is too much. He already spent majority of his funds earned in Lemaire. To maintain this rate of growth, the fiefdom is going to need a steady source of income. With a playful grin, he wonders if he should resort to that thing. He pointed at two golems silently doing their job. The young lord emanated black magic in his hand as he enlisted the golems' help. The poor little constructs of pure magic had not seen their boss for 500 years, but the fear was still there. No matter how many years have passed, the Demon King is still the Demon King. The very next day, Philip approached him with the issue of their swiftly dwindling lamer funds. It wasn't going to be enough to continue operating a fiefdom, but the bills are piling up. Philip is itching to go on another money-making journey, but Luke just shuts his ass up. He wants the records regarding the mine development plan in his hands as soon as possible. Unfortunately, Philip only found records of failed attempts to develop a mine decades ago. They tried looking within the territory, but there wasn't a single sign of a workable mining spot anywhere. Luke then asked why they even incurred so much debt to explore mining with such little chance of success. Philip awkwardly answered that they had to make suboptimal choices due to limited options at the time. The territory was in a horrible state due to a series of unfortunate events happening within a short period of time. And while the residents were moving away, the young lord was unconscious. Luke finally understood that his staff just tried to make things work. They had no choice but to hang on a rotten rope. With a failed harvest season, even maintaining the territory is impossible. However, something is off. He is certain that there should be a workable mine in the vicinity. Looking at the expedition map, he asked why there were no records of a particular area. Philip saw him pointing at the Rokia mountain range, and fear was plastered on his face. Scouting the area out was too difficult due to the abundance of monsters in the sector. They sent multiple knights over to map and scout the spot, but the monsters hiding within every corner of the region made it impossible. They had no choice but to safely return empty-handed. Seeing the smile on Luke's face, Philip can already tell that the devious young man is devising another one of his weird plans. Philip tries his best to preface how dangerous that place really is, but Luke is just salivating at the thought of finding what he's looking for in that monster-infested area. And so, he paid the infamous Rokia mountain range a visit as soon as he could. When he arrived, he thought Philip was just overreacting like usual, but the bastard actually had a reason to be fearful. Giant orcs, devious goblins, fearsome trolls, and all sorts of monstrosities have settled and conquered the sector. Luke found it odd, though. These monsters of different races usually live within separate regions far from each other. So why are they cooperating in one location? Maybe they have adapted to deal with human forces effectively. No matter the reason, these monsters don't seem diplomatic at all. An orc tried to hack him down in one swing but missed. Luke was fast enough to get out of the attack's trajectory, but this is not a fair one-on-one. The small and medium-sized monsters quickly surrounded him from all sides, and they were hungry to draw blood. Since these bastards think they're so tough, it's time to show who's the boss. From now on, Luke will be taking care of these pesky beasts himself. From his black magic circle spawned the 2 supersized golems that he randomly picked out of his castle workers. These 2 golems should be enough to deal with a smattering of different monsters, right? An orc tried to bash the golem's solid head, but it didn't do any damage. The golem responded by launching a solid punch that knocked the wind out of the orc's sails. Luke smiled. This little operation is going better than he thought it would. It's good to know that the future mana stones could handle powering his old-school golems. As soon as one of the orcs fell, the goblins came dropping out of the trees with their weapons drawn. Of course, it was a tragic mismatch. These little green boys can't even make a little dent on golem bodies. The magical constructs continue to mow down every beast in the vicinity without mercy. It is working out surprisingly well, but more monsters just keep on coming out of the woodwork. Dealing with the endless waves is difficult, but there is a method to make this process a lot faster. Luke scanned the area and singled out the strongest aura of the bunch. Judging by one blind orc's intensity all the way from the back, Luke determined that this big guy must be the leader. Luke stretched his legs and decided to join in on the fun. He coated his body with physical strengthening and postured to go in. With a singular quick step, he vanished, confusing the orcs. Since the young lord doesn't have much time on hand to get dirty, he's going for the quickest winning strategy. He flash-stepped behind the orc leader and used his black magic to cast obedience directly to the big guy's skull. The monster growled and groaned as his mind got taken over. Obedience is just one technique from the long list of brainwash magic spells. As soon as Luke finished, his mark was left on the orc leader's forehead. It was a success. It looks like the orc leader is his subordinate now. The underlings of the orc leader stayed put, unsure of what to do. Now that the tides have turned to his side, the first ones to give up were the goblins. They recognized that they were clearly outmatched. Even the lizard girls were starting to falter in confusion. Luke promised the monsters that they wouldn't be hurt if they just brought their respective leaders along. And so, the harsh glow of black magic sparked over and over within the monster-infested sector of the woods. Luke's last victim was the leader of the goblins. As he choked and put the monster under his brainwashing magic, the little critter tried to resist and failed. It tried to break free of the chokehold, but Luke was completely unbothered. Once obedience has taken hold, the goblin passes out from getting his brain fried. The young lord turned to the other goblins and posited a question for the monsters now under his command. He had heard that there was a place where dwarves would come and go. He wanted to know if there was any truth about that rumor. The normal goblins had no idea about the place he was talking about. Just as he expected, normal monsters do not know anything about the place he's looking for. Thankfully, the newly brainwashed goblin leader has woken up. Speaking in perfect human tongue, the goblin leader assured him to worry not. He swore to guide his new master to the place Luke was looking for. After hours of traversing the woods, they came upon a dead end blocked by boulders. According to the goblin leader, this should be the entrance. There are traces of severe landslides, but the spot is emitting a strange vibe. As Luke was wondering just what could be in there, he noticed that the monsters were feeling some discomfort. Just standing near the dead end is making them shiver in fear. What could be inside for these fearsome monsters to be this terrified? Luke will just have to find out by going in. He raised his hand and cast Dark Flame, lighting up the surroundings with his dark fire. Without an ounce of hesitation, he launched the explosive spell into the pile of boulders. Just as he expected, the mineshaft hidden behind the boulders was revealed. It's been here the entire time. When the boulders were cleared away, the fearful reaction of his monster subordinates became a lot worse. So, he granted them permission to go back to their routine. In exchange for not wiping them out, they must agree to never bring harm to humans ever again. All they have to do is spend their time peacefully until Luke gives their next orders. It looks like the monsters are happy to stay hidden until their new boss bestows them another task. But they might also just be happy to get the hell out of the freaky mineshaft. Luke reckons that these monsters will surely be in handy in the future. By his lonesome, the young lord pushed forward and got started for the sake of fixing his fiefdom's financial problem. 5 centuries ago, the societal structure of the world was a bit different. With their overwhelming techniques and force, humans oppressed other races. Seeing beastkins as lesser than them, they treated other races as slaves to be owned, punished, and worked to the bone. They wished only humans would be left on the continent. As such, Seaman, who was widely known as the Demon King, began to burn down one race's kingdom after another. For the other races, he quickly became a beacon of hope and change. His golems were their liberators, and the man himself was looked at as their savior. In the Demon King's tower, he remembered taking in countless meetings and audiences with his monstrous subjects. One orc had a particularly sad case. He came seeking refuge at the Demon King's tower with his 10 surviving tribesmen. In this case, Seaman passed down the order to make a base for the orcs in a different territory where they will take over construction work. Hearing his savior give him and his remaining tribesmen a new lease on life moved the orc to tears. That day, Seaman was hoping to get out of his kingly duties early, but fate had other plans in mind. Next up on the line was a stubby bearded man with pointy ears. He complained that it was not right to make an elderly man wait for so long. The Demon King's lapdog almost tore the stubby man for showing such a disrespectful attitude, but Seaman immediately knew what he was looking at. A dwarf, a representative of an earthen race that possesses the greatest technology, came here to talk with him. On top of that, the energy radiating from this visitor is on a whole different level. So he humbly remarked that he never could even dream of getting a chance to meet a legendary ancient dwarf. Mr. Ancient Dwarf liked how perceptive the Demon King was. It's not easy to tell him apart from a regular dwarf and from appearance alone, after all. Getting straight to business, Seaman asked him for the purpose of his visit when humans are far from matching dwarves when it comes to tech and force. Hearing the word humans soured the ancient dwarf's mood. While humans lack technology, they're still out there indiscriminately destroying nature. Because of their endless expansion, plenty of ecosystems have been ruined. Picking up on what he's putting down, Seaman asked if the dwarves wanted to help him in his mission to wipe humanity out. The ancient dwarf confirmed. If the Demon King can clean humanity up, then the dwarves will use their technology to improve his base. Seaman laughed at the absurdity of this exchange. Despite how it looks, he's still human too. When he asked if that was going to be a problem, the ancient dwarf laughed as if he had just heard the funniest joke ever. He belched and roared, leaving the Demon King confused. The denizens of the world had long since discarded the view that Seaman is human. To them, he is simply the Demon King. Race has nothing to do with it. Back to the present, that Demon King is exploring the sizable mine that the ancient dwarf mentioned to him all those centuries ago. It's good to know that he wasn't lied to, but he found it odd that the place seemed to be holding up quite well instead of being in a state of disrepair. This is just a testament to the ability of dwarves to create lasting structures. They are still unmatched. With the amount of natural ore deposits at the entrance, the young lord reckons that as long as they have people willing to work as miners, the territory would have no worries about their wallet for now. Pushing deeper into the tunnels, he found something odd. The construction abruptly stopped at an odd point. The next tunnel was boarded tightly with wood. The uncertainty is giving Luke the creeps. After he died, he heard that the mine had been occupied by humans. Maybe those humans messed something up. Despite that, there are plenty of valuables scattered about. No matter how rushed they were, the dwarves who dearly cherish their precious tools won't leave their possessions behind. Something is clearly fishy in these tunnels. Suddenly the ground started shaking, and debris started dropping. Behind him, a massive elongated body rushed past slithering. Its red frame dove into the ground, emerged, and dove back down again. In the chaos, Luke threw his torch away to free both of his hands. When the red beast finally showed its whole body, the young lord finally understood why his brainwashed monsters were terrified of this place. In front of him was the master of the mine, the Great Worm. With its rocky body, split tongue, and sharp fangs, the Great Worm snarled and roared wildly. This big guy must be the reason why the mine was abandoned. This little bastard worm is quite a big hurdle for his financial plan, though. What else is there left to do other than get rid of the problem by force? With an explosion of black magic, Luke summoned his 2 trusty golems. They are ready to face off against the Great Worm. With a loud and guttural grumble, the worm tried to assert dominance and intimidate. Unfazed, the young lord ordered his golems to go sicko mode. The Great Worm flexed its elongated body and shot out like a bullet. Thankfully, the golems were fast and strong enough to hold it down in place and halt its momentum. They were pushed back by a few feet, but the 2 big boys managed to trap the worm in its position. Luke stood there looking at the massive worm without moving a muscle, just absolutely mogging the thing while aura farming. He ordered his golems to stay still and keep the monster steady. Luke jumped up to the mine's ceiling with black magic coalescing in his hand. He successfully formed another explosive dark flame spell. From above, he shot the attack with impressive speed and destructiveness. This much should be enough to calm the angry worm down for a bit. While he is painfully aware that his magic has weakened by an atrocious margin, it's still absurd to see that his dark flame can't even leave a scratch on the monster's body. To make matters worse, the grip of the golems is starting to loosen up. When they finally slipped, the great worm quickly shook them away and aimed for Luke's falling body. Without proper control of mid-air movement, the young lord is an easy target to gobble up. Fortunately, one of the golems managed to climb the back of the worm to deal some damage and cause disruption. Mr. Golem pounded the worm's frame, forcing the monster back down to the ground. Luke appreciated the clutch move as if he was having fun and not betting on his own life. He saw the worm closing its maw and behaving oddly and felt his stomach sink. The young lord tried to warn his golem to watch out, but it was too late. The worm shot out and planted the golem squarely into the ground with fearsome force. While one of the golems was stunned on the ground, the worm sped up and went for the ores in the vicinity. Luke was shocked to see the beast munching on the ores to recover from the damage. After eating the metallic ores nearby, its rocky body started producing metal ore protrusions. He's witnessing a monster consuming rocks to evolve. Bro is literally fighting a fucked up Pokemon. This is going to make things a lot harder than he initially thought. With both golems back in the mix, Luke is still struggling to do damage. No matter what skill he uses, he's barely tickling the worm. He has no other choice than to run and think of a better strategy for the meantime. He sets his sights on the exit, thinking that if he wants to win, he needs to bring a gigant here to fight on equal footing. Unfortunately, the worm is too smart to let him get out of its domain so easily. It tossed a debris to block the exit. With the only way out blocked off, Luke's frustrations increased. The beast hissed with vitriol as if itching to snack on the golems and their owner. At that moment, Luke realized something. If a monster the size of the great worm came wandering about outside, it would have left marks all around the forest. But he can't recall seeing such signs. That means this thing only lives inside the mines. If that's truly the case, there is no point in bringing and relying on a gigant to fight the beast. A gigant can't fit in the mines anyway. This complicates things, but Luke knows that the key to fighting losing battles is finding weaknesses. If he can do that, he won't struggle this hard. While his golems are distracting and annoying the worm, he noticed that it was reacting oddly when attacked at certain spots. Just now, when his golem grabbed onto the metallic ores, the worm's mana flow was disrupted. This could be something. So, the young lord ran away and tasked his struggling golems to buy as much time as they could. If his hypothesis is correct, then there must be something he can use nearby. He ran while scanning the mine, trying his hardest to find the solution. Finally, his eyes darted to one side of the mine shaft and lit up. He spotted a necessity for high-level mining, an ancient dwarf's pickaxe. Luke immediately sprinted and grabbed the pickaxe, believing that this tool might give him a chance to deal with the damage. He cast physical strengthening in his body and mapped out his plan of attack. In the blink of an eye, he used his enhanced physical abilities to close the gap and scale the worm's rocky body. As soon as he reached the top of the monster's head, he raised the pickaxe, excited to start mining. Just as he expected, the special pickaxe is a highly effective tool to shatter sturdy ores. His pickaxe swing made the great worm writhe in pain, its erratic movement throwing Luke off balance. As he falls, he wonders if he did not exert enough force in his swing. Finally, the chaotic movement made the young lord's grip slip, free-falling down from a precarious height. Back in the Laka Manor, Philip is getting chewed up for letting the young lord slip away and disappear every night. Poor Philip tried to reason that the young lord was just too good at disappearing without warning. Incensed by his reasoning, Rogers asked Philip what kind of appointed escort knight was unaware of his lord's whereabouts. Crying in frustration, Philip insisted that he really tried his best. Every time he tried to follow the boss, the tricky young lord kept disappearing time and time again. Some residents say that he frequently visits the Demon King's castle, and that's a whole other headache in and of itself. Rogers didn't think twice about it since he was unaware of the situation. But now that he sees how bad it is, he understands why old Hans had been worrying so much. But the trusty butler corrected Rogers that he had discarded any semblance of worry not long ago. Hans has decided to fully and completely trust the young lord in anything he does. Even at this moment of uncertainty when Luke is nowhere to be found, he still believes that the young man is doing his utmost for the sake of his people. Back in the mines, Luke is struggling hard. It might not have worked before, but he has a good feeling about his next spell. With a much bigger and much more powerful dark flame, he targeted the great worm's orehead, exploiting the crack in its seemingly impenetrable defense. The young lord used up every bit of magic in his body for that last hit. He had to be caught by his golems as he fell after exhausting his gas. As the master of the mine explodes the afterlife, Luke playfully jabbed that he can't possibly handle another one of those freaky worms. But thanks to their wild fight and that beast going crazy, it looks like he might be able to save on manpower, as a lot of the ores have been dredged and dropped. Besides, they can just mine the precious ores that grew throughout the length of the worm. The young lord picked his torch back up and explored the rest of the mine. Not far from the battlefield, he saw the remains of a dwarf. Looking a little closer, He noticed some rare artifacts and a few pieces of well-made armor strewn around. There are signs that the dwarves tried to protect the mine. They wanted to fight for what they'd built. As a sign of respect, the young lord constructed a simple grave for the dwarven remains, hoping that it would be enough to honor their efforts. Now that the ancient dwarf has a proper resting place, his spirit can leave all the burdens and be at peace on the other side. Luke also hopes that the dead dwarf wouldn't mind that he took all of the stuff, from rare artifacts to dwarf-forged armor. He assured the departed souls of his former allies that his actions didn't mean he bore any ill intentions.